Good afternoon. Welcome to the third in the series of Pan Dulce conversations between writers of differently wonderful, diverse books published by small independent presses. My name is Lee Bird, and I am the owner of Cinco Puntos Press with my husband, Bobby Bird. And we are located in El Paso, Texas, and today we're going to be talking to two different writers. One is Eric Gamalinda, who's there in New York City. He is the author of a book called The Descartes Highlands, which is published by Akashic Books. And Désirée, would you hold up the cover of his book? Thank you so much. It's a beautiful book. And our other writer is Désirée Zamorano, and she's the author of The Amado Women, which was published by Cinco Puntos Press. And there, Eric has it up. Thank you. They've been reading each other's books. Let me introduce you to Eric first. Eric was born in Manila. He's previously published in the Philippines a collection of stories, 3 poetry collections, and 4 novels, including My Sad Republic, which was the winner of the Philippine Centennial Prize. He worked in Manila as a journalist, covering everything from politics to rock music, and he currently lives in New York City, in that great New York City apartment, and he teaches at the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Columbia University. Welcome to the program, Eric. We're glad to have you. Let me introduce Désirée as well. Désirée, first book, The Amado Women, is published by Cinco Puntos Press. Désirée is a playwright, Pushcart Prize nominee for fiction, and the director of the Community Literacy Center at Occidental College. She also collaborates with Inside Out Writers, a program that works with formerly incarcerated youth. And she's being broadcast from Pasadena, California. So we have the country covered. Yay. Let me go ahead and start and have Eric, if you'll give us a quick synopsis of your book, then we can start the conversation after Désirée gives us a synopsis of her book as well. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. And I'm very glad to be part of this Google Hangout, my very first time, actually. So the Descartes Highlands is about 2 men who live in different parts of the world and who share a common family secret, that they were both sold for adoption by their American father at birth in the Philippines. Apparently their father had run into some kind of trouble, some kind of political trouble in the Philippines in the 70s, back when Marcos was about to declare martial law. So the novel pursues 3 stories of the two brothers who try to figure out what actually happened to their father, and also how they deal with such a dark family history and how that affects their relationships. And the 3rd story is actually the father's journal, which gives us some clue as to what compelled him to make this difficult decision.
Thank you very much. Désirée, would you give us a description of the Amado Women?
Yeah, I'm just listening to Eric. It's like you can already tell how interesting and complex his novel is. So The Amado Women is the story of 4 women connected by birth, separated by secrets. I like to say, cue the dramatic music, family drama, dun 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 dun. But really what it does is it follows Mercy, who's the matriarch, and her 3 daughters. And as most of us know, family members can be so very different. And that's what this is a book about. Women who are very different and yet committed to being connected to each other. So I think Lee is muted, but what I'd like to do is go ahead and chat with Eric a little bit. Eric, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so I was very excited with all of your global backdrops. There's lots of global events happening that, you know, are a direct contrast to our tiny lives, right? You know, that I really want to know why Descartes Highlands. What was the genesis for that desolate place on the moon for you?
Sure. I actually started thinking about this novel about 10 years ago. It was right after 9/11, and I was starting to wonder why we were living in such a world of fear and disunity and alienation and loneliness when we should actually be united by grief. And I thought it was a strange time to be not just in New York, but also in this world. Technology is supposed to bring us together as it is doing right now, and yet I felt that people, or at least, perhaps myself, people were increasingly more disconnected. So the idea was the idea came from that kind of emotion, and I started looking for, in poetry they call it the objective correlative, right? I started looking for a narrative that could express that kind of emotion, and I read about um, um, who had just been arrested somewhere in Italy who were selling babies that they had fathered, which I thought was a very interesting story. And at the same time, I also had started reading about a lot of bombings of abortion clinics up here in New York.
Mm.
Somehow these two stories just became juxtaposed together uh, in the process of writing it. But I chose that title. It's the region of the moon where the Apollo 11 landed in 1972. That was the same year that Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines. So I wanted to make that connection historically because that's where the entire story begins, actually, when the father gets into trouble. But I also wanted to uh, create that kind of mythical place for the characters where the father uh, claims in his journal that he was moving to. The father was kind of some kind of hippie who had these crazy ideas. So the image of the moon is it pervades the entire novel, especially the Descartes Highlands. It's supposed to be an
Okay,
area.
I have to say, from the first page, when you had the young boy writing letters to the father on the moon, I was in. This book I was going to follow to the end because I wanted to know what the heck was going on. So that answers a couple of my other questions because I was really wondering why the adoption theme. But I guess these were the things that really struck you hard. And of course, adoption juxtaposed with alienation is so powerful.
Right, exactly. And it's a very unusual case of adoption. And I was wondering how these two boys would grow up knowing that the conditions around their adoption were actually a little horrific, right? They were actually sold. They were made and sold. It's not your usual, adoption process. I do have some questions for you as well, Desiree, if you don't mind.
Great. Go ahead. I'm ready. I'm ready for you.
Since we're talking about the genesis of our work, I finished reading your book last Sunday, and I was blown away. I was quite breathless after reading the book, and all throughout reading the book, I kept wondering how much of this was based on your own experiences, because the story seems so real and so close to reality. And I know it's a question that I dislike being asked of me, and yet I can't help asking it to other authors anyway, because it just seems so visceral and so real. And I was wondering um, where you found the story, and whether we are supposed to read some of your life into it.
Okay, I love that you don't like this question but have to ask it. I love that. And I think it's so, I too was reading your novel going, wow, what is he telling us about adoption? So, I think it's just very natural. We read these books, we think we know the author. I don't mind being asked the question. It's very funny. In one of my test group readers years ago, as we were writing this draft, a friend of my sister's read the book and said, "Oh my God, I didn't know that happened to Désirée." It's like, no, this didn't happen. So I think what it speaks to is the realistic portrayal of these events. What I did with this book is I wanted to explore the lives of women, because I think the lives of women are complex and have pressures and disparate pressures. We want to care for each other, yet we over-identify. We want to be loved, and yet we want to set boundaries. And in a family that tends to over-identify, it gets really fraught. And when you ask what was true of me, there are seeds of scenes that came from my life. There are seeds that came from the lives of women that I know, because as a writer, I mean, look, you said you read articles about Rome and the abortion clinics being attacked in New York. Everything is material. And I just drew from all of the women I knew, even a random event. I was taking a class, and police officers were talking about an accident that had happened outside of a humane shelter. And they had never found the drunk driver who caused this accident at the humane shelter. And I actually used that to, in a way, somehow redeem that true event. So, wasn't a part of my history. There are 2 or 3 things that are part of my history, but I'm not going to out myself right now. You and I can chat privately. The readers have to figure it out for themselves.
Well, one of the things I love about your book and about a lot of books that I really like is the presence of very strong female characters. And people have told me as well that they notice that my female characters are the stronger ones. The males tend to be not, well, sometimes weak, sometimes ineffectual. And I noticed that your narrative is actually pushed forward by women who are very strong-willed in the face of a lot of misfortune and adversity, right? That in fact, the men are. I was trying to. I was hoping that eventually the men would be redeemed by some kind of moral integrity.
That's the sequel. That's the sequel.
Oh, that's the sequel. Okay, I was hoping Dr. Rigg at least would be, a nice guy, but he is on the surface, right?
I don't think he's a bad guy.
He's not, except that he's using Natalie, right?
He's using him.
Right.
He's not. She is complicit in this. I don't see her victimized.
No, and she refuses to be. That's what I like about her.
Yeah. So, yes, the women do propel the action. The men, the title of the book is The Amato Women. I am interested in the lives of women. They are the most important people to each other in this book. It's just, there are lots of novels just about men, and I think it's okay to concentrate on the stories of women. That's how I have to feel. But I don't think your men are. What did you call them? I don't think your men are weak. They are less decisive than your female characters. I mean, your female characters, yes, they want to go, they want to go forward, and your male characters are thinking about it. That doesn't make them any less developed. I mean, I was very compelled by them, and also I was very intrigued by how they happened to bump into women who were wild about sex.
Yeah, that was the fun part of the writing. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that I think that both of us try to write against the stereotype. I noticed that, and I think I read something that you had written that you wanted to counteract the stereotype of the Latina women. So your characters are very non-typical, and it's something that I try to do myself in a different way. Filipino characters usually are not expected to be intellectual or philosophical, and I wanted to go against that. I had my characters philosophizing like there was no tomorrow, and I knew that would jar a lot of the readers who were not used to seeing this kind of character.
And they were artists. Not only were they thinkers, but they were artists.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Very intentional choice, documentarian, you know?
Right, right. And your characters are very, very upscale, very chic, very smart. They read Russian literature. They know all these fashions and food that I had to Google because I'm not as sophisticated. As, but I like it though. I like the fact that you intentionally try to challenge the stereotype.
Well, you know, when we think about this, Eric, if we don't, as artists, who will? And I have to say, one of the reasons that I chose your book is because that I wanted to read. I was asked for some choices. Because I live in Southern California, I teach at Occidental College. It is in Eagle Rock. Eagle Rock has a huge Philippine community, and I know, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more by an author, and you take it global. And I think that's who, you know, when we say we need diverse books, we need portrayals of ourselves from shallow to profound. And we got a lot of shallow, we got a lot of working class, we got a lot of peons. And I'm not saying that those stories are not valid. I'm saying they are an overrepresentation of the complexity of who we are as people, who we are as artists, who we are as creators. And I think some people were annoyed with the Amada women because they were too upscale. But their roots really were, this is an aspirational novel, their roots were in the working class. And part of Celeste's drama is that's what she thinks she can do. She can make money because nothing else has worked out for her. So yeah, I think it is up to us to stretch the limits of portrayals over and over again in whatever we do.
Right. I also like the fact that even though your characters live in a specific stratum of economic stratum of society, they were not impervious to being exposed to the other side of that reality. I think is it Natalie or Sylvia who actually has to deal with new immigrants and kids who we're just starting to learn Spanish, and I think it creates this whole multi-dimensional portrait of a community without actually, without fixating on what the media would want us to fixate. I keep thinking about this statement by Marquez, his Nobel Prize speech, where and I'm paraphrasing, but he said that if we cannot express our stories on our own terms, then we are not truly free. And I keep, I keep repeating that to myself because I think it's a good piece of advice to keep in mind, especially as a writer. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Because again, if we don't define ourselves, if we don't portray ourselves in our multiple identities, we are going to be labeled and portrayed by others, and they're going to condense us into stereotypes because it's quick and it's easy. And I think I really do, and this is what I do when I'm teaching, I really do feel that's what the definition of a minority. A minority is when we are defined by someone else, when we don't have the power to define ourselves.
Exactly.
That's how I feel.
Exactly. So I'm curious to know about your work as a teacher because I'm a teacher myself, and I talk a lot about these issues with my students. I'm curious to know more about what you do with your students.
Well, as a teacher-educator, I often teach diversity and equity, and that is so. Facebook and Twitter have blown up with we need diverse books or social justice, but honestly, these conversations are very challenging, and you can't have them in the social media with any sense of meaning or engagement because it is a delicate process. It is so easy for dominant culture to shut down and say, I'm not responsible for this, and I don't want to hear about it. Where you really have to gently plan how to display and portray the incredible amount of institutional privilege that goes on in this world, and the roots of institutional racism, and the whitewashing, the literal whitewashing of our history. So I can say that forcefully and dramatically with you in this small group here, but as a classroom teacher, I have to build the foundation to explore it gently and to bring down what we call the affective filter to make sure nobody shuts down. And I've done this with pre-service teachers a number of times, and often it's successful and sometimes it's not. So it's always a challenge. And then, thanks for asking, I also try to address this in my literacy center at Occidental College. We now discuss racism and sexism with the children that we're tutoring. And again, that's in a developmental readiness way. That's after building a really nurturing foundation and a tight community. To have explorations and discussions which are explorations, which are without scolding, without bias. It's a way to explore and discuss our world in a safe environment. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, yes, it does. It's very interesting as well in my class at Columbia, which is actually Asian American cinema, but we talk about race and representation in that class. It's amazing how young people are so unaware of the history of Asians in America.
It's intentional. It's intentional. I mean, go ahead and I'll have a little story for you afterwards.
Well, you know, the only narratives they hear, if ever they hear these narratives, are, you know, the history of African Americans, because, but then again, it's not enough. You know, they know just the basic information. They know about Martin Luther King and all that. But to go into the history of immigration and immigration laws, and even to connect that with other minorities, because I do try to connect Asian American history with the history of Latinos, they're quite surprised actually, which is probably the effect that I want in my class, because I want to jolt them into realizing that there are layers of American history that remain untold. And we can find them in art, we can find them in film, we can find them in literature, but in bits and pieces. And we do have to make an effort to find those narratives.
So at my literacy center, one of my college students says, oh, my kid wants to read about Manzanar. My college student says, what is Manzanar? So, you know, for those who may be listening and don't know, that is California's concentration camp for Japanese American citizens. Now, I couldn't get mad at this college student for not knowing. It's not my place to scold her. She had a wonderful exploration with her fifth grader. And I was explaining this, so I was talking to Tim Tingle, who's an author with Cinco Puntos, and I said, Tim, I went to Alaska, and there's native art everywhere in Alaska. Why is there not, I don't understand why there's not native art in California. And he said, well, that's obvious. I said, it is? What's the answer? He goes, oh, in the 1850s, the governor of California put bounties on body parts of Indians. Here I am, a college instructor, not having known this. And it's like, it is intentional, it is wiped out by bringing it up. It's as if you are unpatriotic, it's as if you are hateful. No, this is our history. And our history has given birth to some crimes that we have today. I mean, when we talk about the U.S. and the Philippines, why was Marcos there?
You're one of the very few who actually probably know why Marcos was there, and you know, very few people know about the Philippine-American War as well of 1899. You know. Probably just a few people who read Howard Zinn might be familiar with that story. But you know, it's a continuing struggle and mission, I think, for people like us to just bring those narratives out to, you know, to the fore.
And I just want to finish with my little Occidental story, that fifth grader who wanted to read Manzanar. Why did she want to read it? Because her grandmother had been interned there.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Desiree and Eric, I don't want to stop you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I don't want to stop you because I feel like I could sit here forever, but I'm out of pan dulce, so what can I do? I want to thank you both and ask you if you could tell us just briefly what your next book is about. Where are you going? What's your next direction? Eric, can you tell us? And then Desiree?
My next book will certainly be about race in America. I'm hoping that it'll be nothing that's ever been read before. But that's basically the most that I can talk about it. I'm actually in the process of writing it right now, and it's going very well. But I think after living for 20 years in America, I'm finally confident enough to join the fray, as it were, and have my say about race.
Good for you. That's great. Desiree?
Well, I kind of got two projects in mind. One is, again, the life of women. I just love women and the contemporary challenges we face. And the other novel I'm working on is I do love my private eye investigator, Nez Leon, and I do think another civil liberties crime that is pervasive in this country is the school-to-prison pipeline. So, and that's something, you know, I love mysteries because we can address social injustices in a palatable way.
Oh, we're looking forward to the work of both of you, and we thank you so much for this absolutely lively and wonderful conversation. Thank you for reading each other's work and enjoying it. And we hope that you'll join us again for Pan Dulce. We're going to go live from the ALA in Chicago on January 31st, I think. And we're going to have Pat Mora and Claudia Guadalupe Martinez. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon. Best to all of you.